Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar on building a culture of positive safety behaviours. We're just waiting a couple of minutes to make sure that all of our delegates have had a chance to join before we start.
Yeah, it's good. Thanks, Jen. Yeah, welcome everyone for coming along. We've been looking forward to this for some time now, and I hope that between the two of us, we can at least impart something of value from kind of differing experiences in the industry. So, yeah, let's hope it's a good session. And yeah, we want you also to get involved. You know, any questions that you've got during the course of the presentation, just type them up. We'll be monitoring as best we can what's coming up on the screen. So, and at the end, time permitting, we should get an opportunity for kind of in the moment questions that you have.
Yeah, that's right. So you should see the comments section. Please do use it. We'll both be looking at it as we're going through the webinar, and we've got some support in the background as well who are helping us present this. So they'll also be looking at that comment section for us. So we're just a couple of minutes after 1, so we'll make a start now. Then, are you ready, Alan? We'll go through.
Yeah, happy.
Great. So just an introduction from for both of us then. So I'm Health, Safety and Culture Lead for Port Skills and Safety. We are the professional health and safety organisation for UK ports. And I lead on developing health and safety strategy for the industry. And I support our members nationwide to drive continuous improvement in health and safety performance through collaboration and the application of innovation. Before working at PSS, I headed up the Health and Safety and Environment and Quality team at Port of Tyne. And during my 9 years at Tyne, I implemented new and improved health and safety processes, and I oversaw numerous construction projects as well. And prior to working in the construction in the port industry, I was in construction and in demolition. So I've been a safety professional for over 20 years. And before that, I was a structural engineer. So I'll let Alan give an introduction to himself as well.
Good, thanks, Jen. So I've got a slightly different background to Jen. I'm currently head of investigations with a Scottish-based company called COMET, company that specialises in incident investigation across industries and root cause analysis. And I know that on the webinar today, we've got many of our COMET friends joining us. So I kind of lead the business in terms of supporting clients who've got typically serious or sensitive investigations that they want that bit of external independent support. And probably from a professional background, I could best be described as a career investigator. I had a full career with Grampian Police in Scotland, where I finished as a senior detective. So I've seen all the kind of murder and mayhem, but I think in terms of the relevance to this input, I also had a role where I was often the lead investigator for offshore oil and gas fatalities in the North Sea, which was on our doorstep in Aberdeen. We had the jurisdictional responsibility for it. So all too often, myself and colleagues, one of them on the call today, we would find ourselves investigating the incidents that nobody wants to have. And what struck me about these incidents is that they're all, and I mean all of them, are eminently preventable. And in the investigation of these things, you know, we look at what are the root causes. And we've got a root cause within the COMET system that speaks about culture, localized site-based culture. And it's disturbing how often that root cause appears in investigations. So I think the webinar today is really important on so many levels, but for incident prevention, absolutely, totally relevant.
Yep. Great, thanks, Sam. So our webinar is split into 4 sections. We're going to talk about balancing productivity with safety. building a positive safety culture. We're going to hopefully give you some practical tools on how you can manage risk. And then we're going to look beyond human error. And the final section is going to be that piece around how we look beyond human error. So we'll make a start then with balancing productivity with safety. And really, many ports and other organisations find that there are really significant productivity pressures that fight against those kind of safety protocols that you have. So those external pressures include kind of tight deadlines, throughput targets, and market demands. And it's how you manage those in a way that allows you to also ensure that you're dealing with your operations in a safe way that follows those safety protocols that you have in place is really, really important. We need to talk about management priorities as well. So, and this is a similar topic, isn't it? You know, you have your commercial goals, because every organization needs to make money. If you don't make money, then you can't, if you don't have a turnover, then you can't exist. But we need to balance that with the moral obligations that we have from a safety point of view. And it's a tricky, a kind of really delicate and tricky balance that really needs that kind of strategic planning and a clear message from your leadership on what it is that really matters to you and your organization. And very important is how those messages come from management to the workforce. So be it the quayside or the shop floor or whatever is the relevant term for your industry. You have what you see as the pressures of the organization, and then it comes down to what the workforce see. So even if you and the management team say safety is our priority, is that what the workforce see as their priority, or do they also feel that there are these kind of perceived pressures around they must still get the job done because they know that it's important to make money? So I think really transparent communication is key. And I think, Alan, you've got some examples around this, haven't you?
Yeah, we were actually discussing this. We did as you would imagine, we did a rehearsal before we did the live show, and it struck me that when I saw this slide that Jen put up, how relevant that is in the world of incident investigation. And again, I can only draw on my own experience here, but I don't know how many times, typically in a task or activity that's team-based, so you've got more than one individual involved. If something goes wrong and there's an incident occurs as a result of that, it's so common to hear the investigation identify pressure, pressure resulting in shortcuts being taken, or corners being cut as a causal reason for the incident. But the reality is often that pressure didn't exist, because when you speak to the supervisors or the management, they're kind of looking at you saying, well, these guys weren't under pressure. Absolutely not, but the pressure was actually self-imposed by the team, just keen to get the job done and do well. So that perception or actual pressure, can often manifest itself in bad outcomes. So it's a very, very relevant, that conversation about that diluting pressure in team-based activity is massive.
Yeah, and essentially, if someone believes that there is a pressure, a commercial pressure for them to get a job done, then that is their reality, isn't it? And so it's very important that organizations address that. The next one, safe workplaces are productive. Safe environment means reduced incidents and improved efficiency, because if you've reduced the number of incidents, then clearly you don't have to tie teams up in investigation. You don't end up with people who are injured or equipment that is damaged that can no longer be used, or a workforce that is unable to work. So it's really I think this is one of the sayings that that you learn very, very early on in your safety career, but it really is worth saying again that it's very important to look at that safe environment and a safe workplace. Investing in that does pay back. From a management support point of view, it's really important that management doesn't just talk about safety, but is actually doing that. So Alan's going to talk a little bit more about the importance of being visible later on as he goes through his sections, but it's that visible membership, management walkarounds, empowered frontline workers, because they feel that there is a trust between them and the management, which means that they can make decisions within their sort of sphere of influence that they know and they're comfortable are going to be supported, and that leads to safe working. And so that combines with the next point here, which is action over words. Demonstrate commitment, have those kind of clear actions, invest in training, have really clear and effective communication channels, and robust safety protocols that demonstrate a commitment to a safe working environment. And if you can demonstrate all of those things within your organization, then you can build that trust within your workforce. So we're going to move on to our next part now, which is Alan's.
Yeah, okay, Jen, thanks. So I want to spend probably 10 minutes or so talking through the importance of building that culture of positive safety. And you know, culture is a very subjective topic, you know, in terms of, you know, we talk about a safety culture. What does that really mean? You know, it's not an exact science. It's certainly not an exact science. And you get definitions that you'll recognize that I'm giving you some examples of here. I'm not going to read them out. You can read them yourselves. But I doubt if any of you would disagree with these examples. But if you Google safety culture, you'll get a dozen of these examples. But I've got my own kind of preferred one that's maybe a little bit tongue-in-cheek, or dare I say, a little bit cynical. But you know how the workforce behave and act on the night shift when the bosses are sleeping and no one is working may distract. In other words, you know, what you're seeking to identify is, you know, how are things done around here? And we'll talk later about this concept that I like to talk about, and that's in terms of work as imagined. I think there's a little slide in it. Yeah, work is imagined versus work is done. What do I mean by that? Well, management and leadership within a business will have a perception of how work or activity operations are conducted. And they'll build procedures and policies to align with that thinking, that imagined thinking. But often during the course of an investigation, you'll uncover that work as imagined is very different to work as done in reality, because the work at the front line is often conducted by those who truly understand the nature of safety in the task they're conducting. So they may slightly adjust or deviate from that imagined policy. So it's a really interesting concept, because if you end up with a, you know, deviation from procedure as being a root cause, you need to be confident that the actual procedures were the best in place, and actually the gap isn't the inverted way that the management had it wrong. So it's just something to think about. We'll talk about it later. There's a couple of, if you like, you know, there's no secret sauce, if you like, for safety culture, but there's some kind of ingredients that we would all subscribe to, and we'll try and talk through between Jen and I. And one is about the importance of fostering trust between your frontline workers and management. You want to get away from this us and them. You know, we come across this all the time. We do a lot of health check reviews, safety reviews. We did a lot with the ports last year, and we've got more to do. And you know, often you get this, well, they want us to do this. And so talking about, you know, some of the more detail, the importance of management, leadership, supervision being really visible and approachable in a truly meaningful way is massively important. So is that communication, open communication. So you're going to communicate any change in policies, any success stories that you have. Following through on commitments. These guys will know if you're being superficial or a little bit false in how you're going about this. Is it, you know, that quayside visit? Is a tick in the box exercise? If a concern or an issue is raised, you need to follow through on that and be seen to follow through on it. Or if you don't, explain why you can't. Don't just leave it hanging out there. You know, that's gonna lose trust. And the importance of empowering frontline workers. These are the people who really understand safety, because they're the ones who are going to lose limbs or fingers if they get it wrong. So, you know, if you don't empower them with the ability to shape procedures and how you do work at the front line on day-to-day activities, then you're missing a trick big time. Negative perceptions. How do you identify and deal with this? Well, this is where I would suggest, you know, this can creep in like a virus, if you like, into your business. You know, because again, you need to understand if there's this kind of negativity, and it's back to us and them again a little bit. You know, you need to understand the context of these perceptions, and how you do that is by it could be as simple as, you know, acknowledging, for example, past mistakes. Every business, you know, gets things wrong, you know, but if you don't acknowledge that, or if you try and kind of cover it up and move on, the guys will see through that. So if you've screwed up, for example, and something's gone wrong at a kind of supervisory or management level, you know, fess up to it and speak to the team, and they'll acknowledge that. And appreciate it, you know. So again, this whole business of promoting fairness and transparency, you know, you've got to apply things consistently, and that's not only positive. You know, it's also recognizing positive contributions. You know, if you have success or something goes well or a project runs to plan, celebrate that unashamedly, because you know you want to show that you truly value your workers for what they contribute to the business, and by default, safety. Team building to support positive behaviours, you know, may seem very obvious, you know, because we all understand the value of that. But proactively, I would suggest go and create opportunities for collaboration. Formalize this, put in place, whether it's a weekly safety huddle, whether it's a pre-shift 10-minute chat with the team. Create that opportunity for them to share ideas and ventilate, if you like. It's important. Similarly, you know, encourage peer-to-peer accountability. You know, have you got a buddy system? You know, do your guys ever actually sit down at a coffee break or a tea break and talk about 2 or 3 safety topics? It's surprising actually how these hard-bitten guys that work on the quayside, you know, that they actually enjoy having these conversations because it's important to them, and that they'll feel valued, you know. And so also, you know, the use of interactive training and simulations. You know, if you run weekly exercises, for example, a fire drill or some sort of exercise, they can become pretty boring and routine. Try and inject a little bit of creative thinking, you know, teamwork in there, you know, hazard identification activities, or throw them a little bit of a challenge, you know. That's more likely to get engagement and buy-in than just routine weekly drills or exercises. And as I said earlier, it kind of links into this: celebrate success as a team. Don't be scared to actually do this stuff. It can be a little bit, if you don't get this right, you know, can be a little bit trite and a little bit contrived. But again, it is important you do it. You know, I worked with an American company recently, and I'm not advocating this is what to do, but they would reward, you know, the supervisors would walk about the yard. It wasn't a port environment, but it was a construction site, very similar. And they would actually hand out physical tokens to workers who were working well, safely, doing things appropriately. You get 10 tokens and you get a half day off or something like that. So there's a reward. But and again, be creative around how you do this stuff. It does matter. And so
I think those kind of interactive trainings and simulations really do work in complex situations such as ports and large construction sites, don't they? And it's really important that people physically work through those potential issues because you can see it there then, can't you? You can, it gives everyone an opportunity to work out how they can get through those. I know that we've many of our members use drills very successfully, emergency drills, and other those kind of organisations to be able to work through particular issues that may occur, and also PSS has just have produced some flashcards, which you can emergency flashcards that you can use to create emergency drills that you might want to run through as toolbox talks or as a desktop exercise, perhaps, to test your emergency systems to check that you've got everything in place.
Yes, that's interesting. So just to kind of close out on this little section here, measuring outcomes in terms of culture, is really challenging because there's no obvious metrics that you can put in place. But what you would expect to see, obviously, if you want to click through, Jen. Yeah, so ultimately, the holy grail of all of this, of course, is to reduce the number of workplace incidents and injuries, but that will not happen overnight. They talk about it could take years to embed, but don't expect that. You should also see by default an increased worker satisfaction and morale. That's what you would expect to see as a byproduct of a more safer workplace, logically. Also, you might, which seems to be, maybe contradictory to the first bullet point, initially you would expect to get a spike, higher reporting rates of near misses and hazards. And I know, Jen, we spoke about this earlier. This can be a tricky one because you need to educate, the leadership teams as to why, suddenly we've set about trying to improve our culture, and hey, we're getting higher rates of near misses and hazards. So that's a positive, because that shows that the organisation, the workforce, are maturing, and they're seeing the value in reporting this stuff. So there's a kind of false positive there that if it's not properly understood or communicated, it can seem like you're going back the way, when in actual fact you're not. You're going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point that a lot of organisations struggle with, isn't it? And it's part of that persuasion or preparation that management teams and senior management need to understand that as you develop a safety culture and you encourage reporting, all of a sudden you do get a higher rate of near misses and hazards being, and sometimes even incidents being reported, because potentially things have been swept under the carpet before. People are maybe not that aware of what a near miss looks like until you educate people. And then once you've educated the workforce, people become much more engaged in all of that. So it is really important. Yeah.
100%. Next one, Jen, if it can.
Yeah, I'll let you. We've got a question, but we'll just go. I think when we've finished your section, there's a question in the comments that we can come back to, but we'll let you finish all of these ones, Alan.
I didn't pick that up. Okay. So obviously, another benefit you would expect for the business is, an enhanced, improved compliance with regulations, safety protocols. Again, this is what you'll get. Is improvements in different areas of the business that give you that uplift. So you get uplift in morale, uplift in safety, uplift in compliance. All of these things are positive for the business. So the importance of having an enhanced safety culture brings way more benefits to the business than just safety itself. Somebody once said to me that, somebody far cleverer than me said, if you've got a business that's operating efficiently and productively, safety is almost like a byproduct of that. You will expect that to follow. So simply focusing on safety alone often isn't essential. And I'm not sure if there's another one to come up, Jen. No, just last slide from me for this one is 3 little bullet points here. My call to action. Whatever else you do, go back and have a reflection on how you communicate with your team in a two-way sense. Go and review safety policies, procedures that your team are familiar with, and get their engagement to identify potential gaps. Remember what I said about work as imagined versus work as done? These guys might have a safer, more efficient way of doing it, but it's contradictory to procedure. So the challenge there is go back and look at your procedures, not try and bend the people to follow procedures that are out of alignment. And even if you can celebrate one positive safety behavior on the key side next week, do it. As I say, I think you'll probably be surprised at the level of buy-in you'll get, because workers feeling valued is massive. Okay, Jen, thanks for that. Is there the question that we spoke about?
So yeah, thanks for this, Stephen. So Stephen says, as we all know, in the port industry has a very experienced aged workforce. How do we have any suggestions on how we can bring this generation of the workforce to engage in praise and victory? My immediate thought when I started to read this question, Stephen, was that you were going to ask about engaging with technology and that kind of thing, which can bring challenges. But I think how you deal with this is probably the same for any organization, because it's about managing change and about very carefully bringing people through. Because as a human race, I think really people are uncomfortable with change, particularly when they've done things for a very long time. And I often talk about the port industry having an even longer organizational memory than other places. So when people say, well, we've always done it this way, usually what they mean is, well, we've always done it this way in the time that I've been here, but that could also be in the time that my father or my brother or my uncle has been in the port industry as well. And so there's a very kind of a really long memory that we're overcoming. And I think for me it's very important that you very clearly explain why you want to make that change, what the benefits will be, but not you should be prepared to do things in small steps. So I think we're going to talk a bit later about culture and the expectation for cultural change, but it doesn't happen overnight. We have to be prepared for it to be small wins and potentially a couple of losses before you make any more progress. And I think that's really important. I'm sure Alan's got some other points to add to that.
Yeah, I get exactly where Stephen's coming from. It's funny, we have a system in the North Sea where when you go offshore for the first 2 or 3 times, you wear a green hat to signify that you're a new member of staff. You're a greenhorn, if you like, and the buddy system will kick in and you'll be looked after. But in terms of risk, if you like, maybe after you've been offshore 20, 25 years, you should wear a red hat, because ironically, incidents occur more with the complacency end of the market. So the importance of being able to draw out that experience in a positive way and try and get, there's often a lot of cynicism around the older side of the workforce. I can include myself in that age bracket now, but I can see how it can creep in. But equally, it's amazing if you can tap into that experience and share it with the younger workforce. It's worth its weight in gold. It's about valuing their experience and taking that into some sort of learning, but get them engaged in doing it. You'll probably be surprised at how productive that can be.
Thanks. Great. So our next part of the webinar is on practical tools for proactive risk management. the things that I'm going to talk about on the next slides, I think may seem like common sense. They may seem pretty obvious, but when you look at the whole list of them, I'm sure that I'm hoping that you will find a few or one or two that you can really take forward within your own organizations. So we're going to go through them one at a time. And the first one that we've got is about planning up front. So poor upfront planning often results in those kind of last minute workarounds which introduce avoidable risk. And it's really, really important, whatever organization you're in, that in advance, every department is involved in planning. So if I use shipping or ports as an example, the commercial team may have given a quote to a shipping company that says we can discharge your vessel within 4 days and and dispatch it, and it'll be on its way to its next port of call, when in fact the discharge is probably potentially going to take 5 or 6 days because of the product that you're discharging, the complexity, the number of available staff, workers for that job. And so when that vessel arrives expecting to leave in 4 days' time, the operations team is already looking for shortcuts because they know that a 6-day job, they need to complete it within 4 to avoid any additional payments and delays. So it's those kind of things about having all of those teams involved so that the procurement team and the commercial teams, when they're placing quotes, have had discussions and planned these operations with the safety teams, with the operations teams, potentially with the environmental teams, depending on what kind of requirements there are for that cargo, to make sure that everything has been properly considered. So that good practice looks like engaging safety teams and other teams early on in the process, and having those kind of cross-departmental planning meetings, which may continue during the process. It might not just be about in advance of that operation being carried out, but for construction projects, that might be to continue throughout the project to ensure that any changes and at the next stages, everything is discussed as we go through. We need to make sure that we bridge management and frontline communication because we want to make sure that we've got kind of engaged workforce and that we don't miss any safety opportunities. So we want that discussion to be open and two-way. It's not just about the management telling the workforce what they want. It's about listening to what the workforce are telling you as well. So as Alan said, and as we go back to Stephen's point, the workforce is massively experienced in the operations that you're doing. So they are the ones that can explain, understand the pitfalls, and really understand the operation and how long it's going to take. So there are some types of good practice which kind of encourage that communication and bring in that trust. Is manager walk rounds, managers actually being visible and including frontline workers in those planning processes, in writing and reviewing safe systems of work and risk assessments to make sure that everything that they see and everything that they do has been properly considered. We're going to talk also about pre-task toolbox talks. You might call them pre-shift briefings. There's lots of different names, but the key is that that they are not generic, that they really focus on what the project is that you're doing or the task that you're doing. They need to look at the risk and at the controls that you're going to put in place. And good practice is to have these as interactive. And if I think back to all of the different organizations that I've worked for, most of them did toolbox talks in some form, but very often it was a printed sheet which was handed round at the beginning of a shift and everyone signed it. And there are much more effective ways of communicating by having interactive toolbox talks where people have a chance to to be able to have discussions about what's going to happen, and potentially consider using visual aids. If you're on a complex site, you might want to be looking at a plan of the site or some photographs of the operation that you're carrying out to make sure that everybody really does understand what it is that you're carrying out. Dynamic risk assessments, again, have various names. It might be that you call them a 60-second check. There are other ways of other names that you call them. But again, it's about assessing a real-time assessment of your working conditions. It's ongoing, but really it bridges the gap between those generic risk assessments and the actual operation at the time. And although these are often carried out, lots of organisations have them. They might have some kind of checkbox or a notebook or however you're noting them at the time. But it's important that they are routinely completed so that everyone's really familiar with how you carry them out, but that they're actually done not just as a tick box exercise, but that there is some value in them. So again, it's helpful if they're discussed as part of a group, so you can talk about what those risks might be and how you might go about, controlling those. Is it a case that you need to actually stop work or not start work until you've got suitable controls in place? And most importantly, if you want a dynamic risk assessment process to be effective within your organisation, you must train people so that they understand how to carry it out. So that involves not just explaining the form and how to use the form, but also how to spot the hazards that you want people to look for. So and getting people to be able to understand what hazards look like and how you might apply controls is really useful, because it helps. It helps in the incident management and incident reporting side of things, as well as this dynamic risk assessment. And then the final one that we have is empowering the workforce with stop the job authorities. So this is a vital tool to allow workers to stop unsafe work. And it's really important that it has leadership backing and that it's well publicised. We want workforce to be able to apply this without any fear of blame. So and I've worked in organisations where this has been quite effective and it has been used, and often the job is stopped by someone because they're concerned about something, and then after a discussion the job restarts because you've been able to explain what's going on, or you've been able to put some very simple controls in place. But it's really important that people are able to raise their hand and say, actually, no, I don't think we should go any further until we've discussed this. And it may be worth looking at how you recognize, what recognition programs you have to make it really clear within your organization that that's supported by management. I think Alan's got some examples of this as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept, the stopping of the job, stop work. I was sharing with the guys earlier that we had a recent, a very serious life-changing injuries incident where, feeding back to the leadership team post the investigation, one of the leadership team, it was a routine task or activity that started to gradually go wrong, but nobody intervened, and it eventually ended up in this catastrophic outcome. And one of the leadership team guys, he sat and he said, I don't know what was in the heads of these guys. I mean, we've got a wonderful stop the job policy. Why did they not just, put their hands up and stop the job, And this takes you into human factors and how people behave within teams. Nobody necessarily wants to be the one to put their hand up and do that, and then it's too late, of course, isn't it? And I said to him, yeah, you've got a policy, but how often, how long has that policy been in place? It's like 5 years, something like that. I said, how often have you measured when people have actually invoked the policy and stopped a job? And he kind of looked at me and he says, well, we don't do that. We don't measure it. So again, this is classic. You might have a policy in place to protect the organization and the workforce, but if it's not working as intended, or it's not real to the workers, it's not worth having.
Yeah. We've got another comment in the comments box. Simon, thank you for this. So Simon said it's human nature and port operatives are no different. Yes, thank you. We've got that up on the screen. No different to find any shortcut, thereby bypassing safety. So it's not just ports, is it? And we agree that we should engage them. often when discussing tasks, the things they say are different from the reality. So just to make sure that I've, that we understand this. I think we're going to get this. I think I understand what you're saying there, but I think my view is that you should always, when you're in discussions, and whether it be in a safety committee or if someone brings you an issue, it's about discussing with them to make sure that you're really clear where they're coming from, and that you can make really clear where you're coming from as well. Because I think you do get these difference of opinions, but you need to find out whether what they're saying is that kind of hearsay, or whether it's something that they're actually experiencing, or whether they're talking about a group as a whole. I think, Alan, you probably got some comments on that as well.
Yeah, I kind of think I know where Simon's coming from here, because I've experienced this. You experience this post an incident where you've got this conflict between, the reality of what they did and what they said they were going to do or did, so because the two are often different. So this kind of comes down, I think, to trust and trying to introduce or eradicate blame. And I'm actually going to go on and speak about that, but I'd quite happily engage with Simon after we've got a Q&A, just to make sure that we're not missing the point here. But his point is well made. There's often a disparity between, what they said they did in the task and the reality, and how. But whatever it is, you need to get to the reality.
Yeah. Thanks.
So
we're on to your section now, Alan, about looking beyond human error.
Yeah, so this is kind of a real passion of mine, and we've got 10 minutes here where I want to share with you some of the experience that we have around about the discovery of human error within incidents that have occurred. And I don't think I can honestly say, hands up, I've never had an investigation yet that hasn't had some element of human error. But if you finish your investigation with the root cause saying there was human error, that's not a good outcome, because human error is a symptom of a wider ailment, if you like. So identifying human error should really be the beginning of your investigation, not the end. And again, typically there's many definitions around human error, and there's one on the screen there that you'll recognize potentially, something that results in an unexpected or unwelcome outcome, a human action or inaction, typically a mistake or a slip or a lapse or some sort of violation. These are the types of errors that we typically come across in the world of investigations. So again, moving on, Jen, my preferred definition, which again is a little bit controversial, but nevertheless, if you can just dwell with me there, if you can somehow within your organization, define an error, a human error, as not something in the negative, but an unexpected opportunity to better encourage the learning that might come from them, then that's massive, because we should not be surprised that human error exists. What you need to do in your organization, I would suggest, in terms of operations, is anticipate errors will occur. So your challenge is, how do we actually help the organization fail as safely as it possibly can when these errors occur? And some of the statistics, I'll bring them up on the screen just one by one. All this is designed to show you is that human error, both across industry and globally, is a high performer in terms of being causal for incidents. So it shouldn't surprise us that these high statistics exist. The challenge is, how do we fix it? And that's what I want to focus on. So the first thing is, you need to really understand human error, and in doing so, you need to actually get into the mind of the individuals or the individual or individuals directly involved in the task or activity that went wrong. Because at that moment in time, despite the error, whatever they did or they didn't do made sense to them. And these are not bad people, so you need to understand, get into their shoes and investigate what I say within the tunnel, not outside. It's very easy to stand back and say, well, with hindsight, what on earth were you thinking about? But that's not going to encourage good feedback or interaction. Blame has absolutely no place in the, the understanding and analysis of human error, human factors. There's a very easy test to apply. I call it the substitute test. But if you've got an incident or a failure where human error exists, then ask yourself, could somebody else, a colleague who performs that same type of task or activity on another day, could he or she have made that same error? And if, as is almost always the case, the answer is yes, then you absolutely know that, that this isn't, an individual issue. It's a systemic organizational issue that you need to fix. And critical to understanding, human error is, looking at what we call performance influencing factors. These are HSE lists of factors that can influence mistakes, and they're broken into 3 groups. The first group is around the job or the task that was being performed at the time. And don't worry, I'm not going to take you through all of these, not at all. You can just pick and mix them, have a look at them, and you'll probably recognize some of these factors that may exist within your world. So looking at the job, there's a list there. Also, the individual in the next slide is also important. Could it be something to do with the individual having effectively a bad day? And we all have those. So again, that could be an issue. Or it could be more likely an organizational issue, how the organization set their people up for success or failure at a higher level in terms of control of work, safe systems of work. And again, in our experience doing investigations, almost always where human error exists, there will be organizational shortfalls, organizational issues that need to be fixed. And so we'll share this list of PIFs with you that might be helpful as a takeaway from the webinar today. We also talk about error traps, and there's a, just do a little bit of self-reflection here as I pop up some very obvious error traps. This list is not exhaustive, but you'll recognize rules that no one follows, time pressure or unrealistic deadlines, procedures that are overly long or complex, under-resourcing for the task or activity in hand, distractive working environment, imprecise, confusing controls or alarms that are set up to confuse you. These are classic error traps that will almost certainly you'll recognize within your world. Some are, hopefully not all of them, but some of them may feature. And so what I'd like you to do, it's a bit of a call to action, is to go back to the work site that you work in, obviously, and get your team involved and organize a site-based error hunt, not an egg hunt. We're coming up to Easter, but we're not doing that. We're doing error hunts. So sit down, take some time out with your team, explain to them what error traps look like and where they lurk, using your performance influencing factors that we'll share with you, and then challenge them to go out and identify some of these error traps that will exist. Go and proactively look for them, hunt them down, sit down together collaboratively, create a plan to eradicate or mitigate the risk of these error traps. And in doing that, you will just have reduced the likelihood of an error-related incident in the future. So if you think about the whole world of safety is that the holy grail is to prevent repeat failure, why wouldn't you try and do that? And just in closing out here, this may seem a little bit odd, but I like this. It's easier to bend a piece of metal than twist an arm. What do I mean by that? Well, if you've got human error, I guarantee that there will be some sort of systemic or organizational issue that's driving that error. If that can be fixed in an engineering way in terms of how can we engineer out the error or reduce the likelihood of the error, as opposed to the more traditional trying to influence individual or human behavior. Don't do this again, finger wagging, try not to be so careless in the future. The engineering versus behavioral is a huge win for system or engineering fixes. Just focusing on individual behaviors is probably not going to give you a very long-standing or certain outcome. And there's a little bit, just to close out, because we're coming to the end, I want to show a video just to set the scene. That the video is just spectators arriving at the Bernabeu football stadium. And there's a lot of human errors in here. Look at this, a lot of near misses, guys almost falling. Look at them consistently. Now, you could look at this and say each and every one of these individuals is making a mistake, but I think we would recognize the mistake's probably not behavioral. It's probably engineered into the fact that you've got a step that's higher slightly than the rest, and it's misguiding or misleading. So that's an error trap. And I wonder if you've got error traps that you could maybe go and fix. But that's the kind of, that's the input from our side. I hope there was something useful in that. And really, again, like Jen said at the outset, we're really appreciative of you taking the time out to join us. You know, we've got a few minutes left. If there's any Q&As that we have, then we can do that in real time. I don't know how we do this, Jen. If people can ask questions,
I'm just looking.
how do we
I'm just
interact
looking.
here?
They're flowing in. They're flowing in, Alan. So Martin has brought one up. Oh, great! Thanks. That's up on the screen for us now. So what would be the best way to explain this to my senior management to move forward? Shall I take that one, Alan? So I think I think that the best way probably is to get them to watch the webinar. So this webinar will be available. This webinar will be available to you if you've registered. You will get the link through. I think it comes through by email from StreamYard. But we're also going to publicize this on both the COMET and the Port Skills and Safety blogs and LinkedIn. So you will be able to access the webinar recording afterwards. But I think that it's important to kind of take those temper expectations. So if you're looking to change culture, it's not a 5-minute thing. And I think management teams should be prepared for the long term. They should be prepared to have a plan that's maybe 3 or 5 years long, with those kind of small wins and those stages that allow you to see how you're improving. So take your notes and hopefully the recording from this, and explain the points from there. Thanks, Martin. We've got another one from Dawn. Where do I start building this kind of culture?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Jen, if you want. I think we said, culture is such a subjective topic. There is no exact science or secret sauce, as I said earlier, but there are some essential ingredients that if you don't have kind of in the recipe, you're never going to get there. And these are covered off around about, first of all, the organization needs a vision. That can be a corporate vision, or it can be a very localized site-based vision. You, as a team supervisor, can create a vision for, your small team of workers. But you need that, definitely need the commitment from the top down. 100% you need that. If you don't have that, it's not going to succeed. And if you don't engage your people in the process, take them with you on the journey, it's not something you can do to them. You've got to do it with them. And if you don't get that, you're going to struggle. And I think the other one around that is communication and engagement. My goodness, if that doesn't exist, you've got no chance. So however you develop that engagement and trust so that your people feel valued and recognized for what they do for the business, that's something you need to think about as well.
Thanks, Alan. Whilst you've been talking, there's been a lot of really great comments. So thank you, everyone who's kind of thanked us and said that you've enjoyed and found the presentation helpful. There's one here from Stephen. Stephen's turning to a behavioural safety program. Is this something that others have done? Yeah, I think other organisations have. It's if you look on the port skills and website, port skills and safety Ask Members website, in our Ask Members section, there are some great comments in there from that people have asked questions about safety culture, and feel free to post one there if you're a member as well.
And what I would say to Stephen is that, you know, if you're away to adopt that, then I would love to talk to you about it, not from a commercial point of view, but just from an experiential point of view. Because if all you do is focus on trying to influence individual behavior, you know, BBS, you know, was massive in the 90s, and you know, there's this other concept around human and organizational performance. It's called HOP. That's something else. If you can tailor that in with behavioral safety, then that's really worth doing. So you can happily reach out to me, Stephen, after this. You'll get my contact details, and be more than happy to discuss that with you in a one-to-one.
Great, that's great. Kevin has asked if the presentation will be shared with us. Kevin, you'll get the link to be able to view the webinar as a whole. The recording is the word I'm looking for. You'll have a chance to be able to view the recording and see those slides again. So if you want to make additional notes, you can view from the recording. Again, some really lovely comments from people about food for thought. Thanks, Grant. And particularly interesting and balancing productivity with safety. Thanks, Kirsty, for that as well. So that's great. I think we just have a few more minutes if there are any additional questions that anyone else has. Great. Stephen's come back, Alan. He says that he will connect.
Okay, I'll put up my email.
Well, I think both Alan and I are available on LinkedIn, and you can find our details on the both the COMET and the Port Skills and Safety websites as well.
That's my email up there.
Great. Alan's email's there as well. Great.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we've pretty much used up the time, and yeah, just reach out. I hope you get something out of it, even if you pick one or two of the hints and the tips that Jen and I try to share. That's been a worthwhile hour. Great.
Thank you very much, everyone. It's been lovely to be able to share this with you, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one. Thanks.
Bye.